This is Rio's first caching training session. Now that she's caught the lure, Rio's natural instincts tell her she must take her prey and hide it somewhere safe. Rio doesn't realize that all she's caught is a piece of dried rabbit skin. She thinks that because it smells like a rabbit, it must be prey and something worth eating. What I'm trying to do here is basically manipulate her natural instinct and teach her that the only safe place to take her prey is in the caching box. There she goes. She finally takes it into the caching box. So I quickly hurry down and give her her reward, a piece of ground rabbit meat. A few days later, once it seems clear that Rio has started to understand the reward portion of caching training, namely that once she puts the lure in the box, she gets some food, I then introduce the negative consequence that comes from her not caching in the right spot, namely she loses the lure to the caching training tube. Once Rio catches the lure, I give her a moment to sit and chew on it, and then I give her a slight tug to make her want to cache the lure somewhere. When she takes it to the wrong spot, I then pull the lure up into the caching tube. With many mink, this is easier said than done. They will often stubbornly hang on to the lure, refusing to let go. For mink who do this, it's typically easier and safer for the mink to use a bucket of water to get them to release the lure. Simply plunge the end of the caching training tube under the water, and the mink is forced to release the lure eventually so that it can come up for air. Once the mink releases the lure, it's then pulled up into the tube. After stealing the lure with the caching tube, I make Rio wait for a moment before giving it to her again.
Good boy, good girl.
We see that Rio quickly learned her lesson this time and instantly took it to the caching box. Realize that it's not typically this easy, and you'll often have to repeat this several times before the mink finally takes it to the box, or before you end up helping it to the box like you do in the initial steps of training. After Rio mastered caching inside, we took her to a local fishing pond where I'd like to hunt muskrats in the winter. Here we could start Rio's caching training outside. Before we start our training, we allow Rio to go for a little walk to get some exercise and work out her extra energy. We are careful during this walk to make sure that Rio doesn't have any run-ins with the muskrat. She's far too young to handle a muskrat at this age, and we don't want her to have a bad experience breaking her confidence. You may notice that as Rio walks along the lakeshore, there's a small group of ducks following her. It may sound strange that the ducks would want to be so close to such a deadly predator, but it actually keeps them safer because they know where the mink is. Because ducks can both outswim and obviously fly away from a mink, as long as the mink's in plain view and they know where it's at, they're reasonably safe. Allowing Rio to explore around like this before we begin training both allows her to accustom herself with the new area before we do training, as well as burn off a little extra energy. Young mink often have a hard time focusing at the task at hand when they have too much pent-up energy. And also, any mink has a hard time focusing when they're in a brand new area. So this little wandering around and exploring is actually a vital part of her training.
Rio, what you doing? You looking for something to eat, huh? You looking for something to eat? Come on, should we feed her first? Let's give her some food.
After a little while, Rio decided to wander off, which gave me a perfect opportunity to practice her food call. Glingo ho! Glingo ho! Glingo ho! Glingo ho! Glingo ho! Glingo ho! I gave Rio just a big enough piece to reward her for coming, but not so much that she would be full because I didn't want to ruin her appetite for the caching training. I started out by calling Rio when she was right in the caching box. That way there'd be no way she would forget where it was. Notice that we're doing our caching training in an open area where the only good hiding spot is her caching box. That way, when Rio catches the lure, she's not as tempted to take it somewhere else. Fortunately this time she takes it straight to the box without any hesitation. Other mink might not do it as easily, and it might take several repetitions just to get them to take it in the box, even when that's the only hiding spot. Each mink is different, and you can't expect them to act the same or learn at the same rate. Fortunately for me, Rio's seeming to pick up caching quite quickly. Other mink, it takes a lot more work and effort. But we still have a long way before Rio's pulling things out of a hole and caching it in her box. That's when caching training gets really frustrating, as it's very tempting for the mink to stay in the hole where it's already caught the prey, rather than pulling it out of the hole and putting it in the box. This day we take Rio to a small stream so that she can play and experience new things. By taking Rio to lots of new places, it helps her to be comfortable in new surroundings, rather than only comfortable in very specific places and situations. This is helpful because as a hunting mink, we never know where we might take her hunting. And so to have a timid mink who only likes certain scenarios and places doesn't really help things at all. This also helps to replicate what Rio would experience in nature. In nature, she would be following her mother around as she hunts, and mink hunt in various different areas throughout their territory. So by seeing new things and experiencing new places, it's a much more natural way to grow up, rather than always taking a walk in the same place every day.
Because I could put the leash on her and you could let her keep playing. So I'll go grab it and then we'll start the film over. He looks fine.
An important part of these outings is to make sure that her caching box is close at hand, so that when she gets wet or tired, she can go to her caching box to dry off and rest. This is important because while hunting, she will need to be accustomed to looking for her caching box after capturing prey.